Good to be back in Columbus. Somewhat reluctantly, but in a good cause. So I'd like to offer by the way, I want to thank my joint sponsor, Representative Speaker Pro Tem Huffman, for his good work in this process. And I think it's been very encouraging to a lot of people in our state of Ohio to see that we are going to address this critical issue. Speaker Batchelder and members of the House Rules and Reference Committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide sponsored testimony on House Bill 597. Ohio has a Common Core problem. When I was first brought into the loop on Common Core, that was a constituent of mine in Noble County. Small county, actually it was the last county created in Ohio. For those of you who are interested in trivia, yes it was. But it's one of my counties, and so I listened very carefully when I get a call. And she was a teacher. She asked me some questions, and they were questions that I really couldn't answer regarding Common Core. She said, "Do you know about this Common Core stuff?" And she said, "It's pretty disturbing. Really don't like what I'm seeing here." So I made some phone calls, talked to some people who offer us advice on education, and I was even more concerned after that. Because the answers I got were kind of talking points, kind of pablum. It wasn't really answering my concerns or giving me clarity on how we got to where we are and what we should do going forward. So I looked into it further. I've attended several seminars. There was an excellent seminar at Notre Dame that I attended a year or more ago, actually more than that. And I've continued to educate myself on this topic. And that was the genesis for the bill that I did originally, House Bill 237. To try and give you some background on this, I don't like to belabor this because I've heard the story a lot, but I want to share it with people who might not have heard this story before. It was in a 3-month period in the spring of 2010 that 45 states, including Ohio, signed on to Common Core, taking race to the top money in a process driven by the U.S. Department of Education. Merely to compete for these funds, let alone obtain them, the states had to agree to adopt a set of college and career-ready standards common to several states. Ohio was chosen to receive race to the top funds during the second round of applications. Ohio's application was due 1 day before the final standards were released. Many other states agreed to adopt the standards before even having seen draft standards. And in this difficult climate that we were in at that point, this was a very enticing prospect. As Representative Huffman talked about, money in a time of financial crisis is very appealing. But along with that cash came requirements regarding the instituting of a statewide longitudinal database, mandatory assessments that would be designed under the direction of the federal government, and teacher improvement and evaluation requirements. But much of what we've been told about Common Core just is not true. The international benchmarking is not true. The fact that these are superior to anything out there is certainly not true. But over the course of the next 3 days, you will hear testimony about Common Core, the problems we're experiencing because of it, and why repeal is so urgently needed. Today, my joint sponsor, Speaker Pro Tem Huffman, and I present House Bill 597, which will repeal Common Core standards in the state of Ohio, replace them with proven superior standards, prohibit the State Board of Education from using any assessments based on Common Core standards, and stop any taking of data that is not aggregate in nature without the informed written consent of the student's guardian. This protection would also apply to teachers and their personally identifiable data. Their informed written consent would be necessitated before the release of any such data. We also want to restore some sanity in the assessment process so that we aren't so caught up in data gathering that we destroy what makes for a meaningful career for teachers and a thoughtful exchange in the classroom. Excessive and time-consuming assessments are another drawback to the Common Core initiative. But certainly we're not going to get out of assessments entirely, but we wanted to just ameliorate this if we can. One of the other things referenced constantly in the text too as you read through the code, and I don't think this is necessarily attributed to Common Core, but is model curriculum, model curriculum, model curriculum. Again, this is something that's supposed to be an object of local control. And they're supposed to have the ability to choose what curriculum and textbooks they think make the most sense. So that's something that we consider very much in the formulating of this legislation. House Bill 597 substitutes the award-winning Massachusetts academic standards. And when I refer to Massachusetts standards, these are not the Common Core Massachusetts standards. These are the pre-race to the top Massachusetts standards that led them from kind of a middle-of-the-pack performer to #1 in the nation. And it was certainly a remarkable achievement. The architect of those standards will be testifying tomorrow evening if anyone here would like, I assume you all will be attending, but I'd like to welcome everyone else here who's in attendance tonight to come, and we'll build an addition onto the State House if we need to. So these standards and their accompanying assessments will be in place while Ohio undergoes the process of writing its own standards. So this is not an end-all, be-all. This is a placeholder while Ohio sits down and doesn't take the standards written for them by some other consortium, but rather considers what standards make sense for Ohio. And I think that's what a lot of people are interested in seeing. There will be much greater accountability in that process, something that was lacking during the adoption of Common Core. Massachusetts standards will include those for English language arts, math, science, history, and social studies. Although Ohio officially and under Common Core adopted the English language arts and math standards, there are other standards that have been written by the consortium that are in some cases in place already or being in the process of coming into place. And so while there was, again, no shots fired in that process, they are working their way into the classroom, and so we wanted to address those as well. And the other thing about the language in this bill, we talk about the Common Core standards or anything resembling the Common Core standards that are too much been renamed. For example, in Ohio, you know here, Ohio's New Learning Standards. Well, it's Common Core under another name. So that's something that we want to address. Then also on the testing side, you have Smarter Balance, and you have the PARC, the Partnership for the Assessment of the Readiness for College and Career, which Ohio is part of that consortium, signed a memorandum of understanding that agreement in which we agreed to provide data to them, personally identifiable data or whatever data was needed by the consortium. So that's something else that the bill addresses, anything resembling that. So Ohio will have a process under this bill of we'll have the placeholder standards. We have a path forward in terms of the testing, and that's going to be, again, further discussed as we go through this hearing process. And then ultimately, Ohio will design its own standards, and we have also a prescription for how that will take place to ensure that we have more of that accountability within the political process that Representative Huffman alluded to. That was missing previously. During the next 3 days, you will hear from teachers, parents, school board members at the state and local levels, experts in standards and education policy, concerned citizens, and also an expert in childhood development. One of the things about these standards that was most disconcerting was they were inappropriate developmentally. That's a criticism that we've heard, and I've been part of learning more about that. I'm not an expert in child psychology. If you ask my kids, they would tell you that. But we need that expertise. We need to bring that to the table to make sure that we get an outcome that understands how kids learn and at what point in that learning process they grasp and move on to the next level. You can't just throw things and say, we're going to do 3 times as much in 2nd grade, then we're going to slow down in 6th grade, and then we're going to speed up in 8th grade. You need to be conscious of how young minds work and how they interact in the classroom. So we're going to have testimony on that as well, and that's part of our bill, trying to get that right going forward. We need to base our educational approach on the unique and varying talents and skills of our children. We need high standards and to hold our education system accountable to those high standards. We're not merely preparing students for a vocational career, although that is important. We're educating our citizens and giving them the ability to think critically and independently is important. Ultimately, Ohio must be in charge of that process, not merely a bystander in a national consortium that makes state and local control a meaningless concept. House Bill 597 gives us that opportunity. Is this bill perfect or immaculate? No, but this bill and the committee process will help us chart a much better course for our state. It has been a long road getting here. I want to thank the Ohio House leadership for providing me the opportunity in this hearing and subsequent hearings to share the local and national concerns about Common Core and offer a remedy so that Ohio can have a well-past-due conversation about how best to meet the needs of our children and our educators when it comes to public education. I ask for your favorable support of House Bill 597, and will do my best to answer any questions you may have at this time. And I want to acknowledge, too, that I've worked with a series of stakeholders in this process, people who have been concerned, and you see a lot of shirts expressing public concern there. I've had the benefit of some expertise of people who have been at this process for a long time, who helped call my attention to this, and I had experts, names you've probably heard who will be testifying, like Melanie Elsey, who has been involved in education for many, many years here at the state level. I benefited a lot from her input and her expertise. Heidi Huber is another person that I've worked with closely on this issue. So we have stakeholders who have some important input, and you will hear from them over the next couple of days, but I will do my best along with Speaker Pro Tem Huffman to answer any questions you have at this time.